All fragrances are treated equal.
That's definitely a truth. Indisputably, undoubtedly, undeniably, some might say indubitably. If you agree with that statement, then you are as wrong as I am. That is not the truth. All fragrances are not treated equally. We're going to talk about it today. To keep this simple, we're going to talk about 5 fragrances that get no love, and I know why. In my opinion, there are 3 main reasons why these 5 fragrances remain overlooked, under-discussed, or downright dismissed. Number 1, the scent is atypical. This doesn't mean it's necessarily polarizing, but it's definitely not necessarily mainstream, which means mass appeal is low, at least in theory, which means that most of the average consumers of fragrance are gonna overlook it without even thinking about it. Now this ties into point number 2. Where do these opinions come from? How do people form these opinions? Well, another reason why these fragrances don't get the love they deserve is because they're off the review grid. Reviewers on social media are not highlighting them, or they're highlighting other fragrances that are maybe similar instead. Since a majority of fragrance enthusiasts consume at least some fragrance content on social media, and a majority of that majority tunes into some of the largest fragrance channels across YouTube. If these fragrances don't grace the content of these creators, then they remain mostly unknown. And point 3 is also connected to all of this. It's the opposite side of the coin for point 2. If reviewers are actively discouraging their viewers from trying these fragrances, then obviously that influences the fragrance's dissemination. People are talking bad about them, that means fewer people are going to try them. With all that out the way, let me tell you these 5 fragrances you should have already tried by now. No particular order here. This first one up is an obvious one. Again, I know why these fragrances are overlooked. I get it. This is Gucci Guilty Absolute Pour Homme. I see negative comments about this fragrance daily. So people are actually talking about it, but they are sending discouraging messaging about it. And this kind of falls in line with all 3 of these points that I've talked about. All 3 of the reasons this, in this case, is actually polarizing. It is not only atypical, but it is quite divisive. Leathery, earthy, woody, kind of medicinal smelling. Doesn't change all that much. Smells maybe reminiscent of some environments that people are not keen to, like the doctor's office, the dentist's office, whatever it may be. For whatever reason, I am completely drawn to this fragrance, and I think a small crop of you watching feel the same way. That being said, if you have yet to try this fragrance, because you've been discouraged from trying it, you've seen nothing but horror stories, this is Uncle Justin getting on camera and telling you, get a sample, see for yourself. In this case, I would say let morbid curiosity get the best of you. If you don't know what that is, it's the idea that people find the unknown more unpleasant than the unpleasant known. At least if you try it, then you know. So just make sure you know first. Don't just pass the judgment based on what everyone else is saying. Step out of the pasture, let the other sheep do their thing. Try it, see for yourself, and if you don't like it, that's fine. Gucci Guilty Absolute. I think one of the main reasons why this fragrance is not being talked about a ton is because it's pretty new. It came out just last year. However, I do think that it is not necessarily mass appealing. It does have elements to it that are similar or at least parallel to elements of other more popular fragrances in this genre, being the aquatic fragrance. Aquatics do very well on the mainstream market, but this is an aquatic that actually has depth and interest. That's not for everyone. Kenzo Parfum EDP. I think this is a brilliant fragrance. It is an aquatic with depth, and if you care about it, it's an aquatic with performance. This stuff is beautiful. There is an odd fruitiness to it. I think someone told me it was fig, and as soon as you told me that, whoever you are, I appreciate it. I get it. It is kind of a sharp, sweet fruitiness that you get mostly in the beginning stages of the scent, but it is wrapped up in salt, a mineral-like wateriness, and a dark, smoky, woody, suede leather feel that is kind of sexy, and it lingers in the air, especially as this gets into its dry down stages. It is stunning. It is one of my favorite aquatic fragrances right now, and definitely my favorite designer aquatic fragrance that I have personally smelled to date. Checks all the boxes. If you're asking what Justin's boxes are, this is Kenzo Homme EDP. I'm gonna have a link down below to check it out. Do yourself a favor, check this out for the upcoming warmer months. Now, I understand why this fragrance doesn't get the love it deserves, and it's because it has reminiscence to a slightly older style of fragrances. If you're familiar with green, woody fragrances from the 80s, you're going to get a reminiscence here. From Bottega Veneta, we have Pour Homme. This is the Eau de Toilette. All of its flankers are effectively discontinued, but this one is still out there. It's coniferous, green, fresh, kind of piney, quite woody, a little bit supple and leathery, smells gentlemanly, smells refined, but understated. And I think that's another reason why people may not dig it, because even if they do like the scent, they may not get great performance out of it. I think that's what it was intended to be. It's not supposed to be a screamer. It's literally for a gentleman. It goes in line with the brand's aesthetic. This is not a boyish fragrance that's meant to get the attention of everyone. So if that's not for you, it's not for you. But I understand a majority of people seem to like their fragrances to be more present. They want to be noticed. I understand. This is not that. So not only does it smell a little bit more vintage, but it also doesn't perform amazingly. Now for me, it's fine. I get between 5 and 7 hours on my skin, and I love it for every minute. But I see why reviewers aren't talking about this. This is not a chick magnet. This is not a panty dropper. This is not a groin gripper or a loin drencher. At least not for the floozies that you young guys are going for these days.
What?
I'm kidding. Maybe. Bottega Veneta Pour Homme EDP. Now this is already one of the most underrated brands in the designer realm, and I think that is a big contributing factor to why it's not getting a whole lot of love across the board. Nobody really considers Cartier. You don't see a lot of the biggest channels talking about them on a regular basis. Yeah, they'll pop up here and there. But this fragrance is one I don't see a ton of talk about, especially today. I've seen it talked about over the years, here and there. But today, not so much. L'Envol. Why is this overlooked? It is a little atypical. I do find it extremely pleasant, but in an odd way. Very unique smelling. This is honey, like the way it looks here. Sweet honey that's freshened up by a lot of violet leaf. A little bit of powdery iris in there, maybe some spice. Also a nice little dose of woods in there, so it keeps it from going off the rails of just sweet, fresh. There is a nice woody grounding, maybe some vetiver or something like that. I think it is an attention grabber because of its sweetness. Sweetness is appealing to most people, especially in the air. It's not terribly powerful, which is fine. It functions as an eau de parfum should. Radiates pretty close, but it will leave a bit of a trail, but it's not going to fill a room, and thank God, because this scent profile would become obnoxious if it did that. Anyway, if you haven't checked this one out yet, please do yourself a favor. I'm going to have links down below in the description. No matter what anyone is saying or not saying about Cartier L'Envol, you need to try this before you die. And our final fragrance. The reason why this is overlooked is because it did have a little bit of its heyday, meaning that I remember it being talked about more when it first came out. And it's been probably almost 10 years since it came out. Since then, the brand itself has been acquired by a parent company. Some changes have been made in aesthetic and how they're choosing to market things, the type of fragrances they're choosing to create, and the old kind of died off a bit. Now, this fragrance is still technically available and being manufactured by the brand, but I heard it might be a little different. I haven't tried the new version. This is from Valentino, it's Womble. And to put it simply, this is being overlooked by its contemporary counterparts, of which smell nothing like this. The Born in Roma line seems to be what is hot right now. People are talking about it, they keep making flankers, and it's obviously nothing like this. Now, I have only tried a couple of the fragrances in that line. I am completely unimpressed. I have no desire to try the new ones that keep coming out, no matter how sexy or mass appealing they might be. They're not special to me in relation to something like this. Now, I'm so glad this is still available. You owe it to yourself to see what Valentino was really doing not that long ago, making fragrances that were actually interesting. Now, granted, this was influenced by Theyre Homme, if I'm not mistaken, maybe even perfumed by the same perfumer, Olivier Polge. Well, I should correct myself. The original Theyre Homme was perfumed by Olivier Polge, but that is no longer available. It was reformulated in 2011, perfumed by Francois Demachy, who was the in-house perfumer at Dior for some time. But nonetheless, there would be no 2011 reformulation if it wasn't for the original, which came out in 2005. Nonetheless, special stuff, timeless fragrance, nutty, woody, sweet, slightly powdery, almost iris-like in a way, that kind of waxy powderiness, chocolatey, warm coffee, succulent but gentlemanly. Do yourself a favor and check this out if you haven't already. Again, it's still out there. I want to thank my good friend Marco for gifting me with this bottle. Marco, thank you so much. All right, once again, there's going to be links to everything down below. I want to know what you think of this topic. Obviously, I wanted to talk about fragrances I love, but I wanted to give it some substance. I wanted a deeper meaning, a more significant undercurrent to discuss because it applies to more than just these 5 fragrances or just this video. What is your take on what is being hyped right now? What is at the top of the mainstream pile? Do you find most of your satisfaction from going for those fragrances that are highly talked about, or are you getting bored of it? I don't mean to be persuasive in that question. I generally want to hear both sides. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and thank you so much for tuning in. Peace. I'll see you in the next one.